Hey, if you got a Bible, go to Psalm 16. If you don't have one, there should be one underneath the seat in front of you. Psalm 16 is where we are. And if you are using one of those Bibles underneath the chairs, page 453 is where we're at. So we've been in the Psalms for the last few months, and what we're finding in the Psalms is that many of the emotions that we feel, many of the things that we just know. We feel like I'm reading through the Psalms and going, yeah, I've been there. Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. These Psalms that we feel, these feelings, these emotions that we feel, just whether it be joys or frustrations or hurt or pain or despair, sadness, whatever it is, whatever come, the emotions that come with just living in a broken world, we're finding that we've got a friend here. We have someone here that that is identifying with us. Like, this is life in a broken world. And what the Psalms have been, they help us do is give us language to, hey, how do I express this sense of like frustration, despair, whatever it might be, knowing that God is in control, knowing that God is sovereign. Like, how do I bring this together? How do I express faith in God in the midst of living in this broken world? And the Psalms are kind of giving us some help there, giving us a way to express these things. The Psalms show us that with all of these things that we feel, that we're walking in with today, that we have a place to go with it. Like, we've got a place. We're not just kind of left, like, what do we do? I'm just in this constant despair. We've got a place to go with it. And something else that the Psalms does is that it's shaping the way that we think about life. That the Psalms come at us and shapes the way that we think about God, the way that we think about our life, the way that we think about the world around us. Because let's just be honest, sometimes we just get it wrong. Like, we just get it wrong sometimes. So there are some things that we've just made assumptions about, or that we've made some conclusions about that are just wrong. We're wrong about life, wrong about human nature, wrong about God. And listen, some of you in this room, maybe you've never really said it, but you thought it, and maybe you're kind of in this season, but you're a skeptic. And you're not really sure what you think about this, and maybe you've kind of rejected God, you've rejected the Bible, you've rejected Christianity, and it very well could be that what you have rejected is not the God of the Bible, but what you assumed God to be, or what you were taught growing up. Others of you maybe you've like, no, I haven't rejected God, but the fact still remains true for you is that there are some of you that you're worshiping a God that does not exist. Like, you've made up this God. It's not the God of the Bible. Perhaps you wonder why you're just as angry and miserable as anybody else. Well, it could be that the God that you say that you believe in is not the God of the Bible. It's the God that you've imagined him to be. That he's the God that just agrees with you on everything. Like, he's the God that you've got an opinion about something and God just agrees. He goes right along. It's everybody else who are the idiots. They're all the problem. But me and God, we got this thing figured out. It could be that you've missed something. But so the Psalms confronts our thinking and our beliefs to say, hey, look, this is what life is about. This is who God is. This is what your life is. This is what is up in the world. And we get some of that here in Psalm 16. And so this is David's psalm, has been most of the psalms that we've read so far, we've gone through so far. So David is writing this, and here's how he begins Psalm 16. He says, "Preserve me, O God." The word preserve here, in its original language, the Hebrew language which this was written in, sometimes when I kind of mentioned this a couple weeks ago, that sometimes when we get the translation from Hebrew to English, we get, like, our languages don't like mesh up, like they're not totally in sync, and so we have a really good idea of what's going on. But sometimes there are some things that a word in the Hebrew is kind of paints a picture where our English word it comes up short a bit. And in this word, in Psalm 16, preserve here is a word in the Hebrew language that literally means to guard or to protect. It's the picture of a guard, like a security guard around a president, or a guard around watching over a king. David is asking God to guard him. He's asking God to protect him, and we don't know exactly what it is that's prompted this, like why he's asking for this at this moment, and we don't necessarily know at this moment what he wants protected from. We just know that he wants protected. He wants God to protect him. This is David crying out for help. Preserve me, O God, for in you I take refuge. So David is saying, look, I need something, I need somebody to protect me. I need some security here. And this is all of us. This is all of our experience. We can all relate to David here. All of us want that. All of us want safety. We want security. We look around the world and it's a mess. I mean, there are viruses, there are shootings, there's instability in our economy, instability in our jobs. We want security. We want to know that what I've trusted in is going to be there to hold me up. We want to know that whatever I've put my hope in, that I'm trusting in to take care of me, that it's going to come through, that it's going to protect me. Maybe some of you can relate to this, and if you have children, it's like when you put your kids to bed at night, sometimes you have to deal with this idea of safety, of fears. It's dark, they're alone, and suddenly crazy things start going through their head at this moment, right? Things that they could have brought up at noon, but it has to come at like 9, right? When everybody's ready to go to bed. It's like, have you noticed this? It's like the deep questions of life come when everybody wants to go to bed, right? It's like, hey, good night, honey. Hey, but what about, like, are you kidding me now? Like, we were at lunch. Like, why can you do? Anyways, sometimes these questions come up, and these questions, a lot of times, questions of fears come up at bedtime. Is somebody going to break in? My youngest daughter, she kind of will do this from time to time, and I'll know when she's kind of having these fears because I'll go around, and when it's time for me, everybody's in bed, I'm turning off lights. I'm locking all the doors, I'm pulling the curtains, and I go around and it's all been done. I'm like, oh, Addison, she's had one of those nights. All right, I get it, all right. But sometimes she'll do that. But these are the questions. Is somebody going to break in? Are there monsters? Are there dragons? So what do we do as parents? Like, we're trying to get to bed, right? So we lie to our kids, right? We lie. We just lie to our kids. But here's the thing about Christianity. Christianity doesn't ignore the hard stuff. It doesn't teach us to just think just have positive thoughts. Just don't think about that stuff. Like, think about something nice. Think about, sheep or something. That'll help you go to sleep. No, Christianity tells us that the world is broken. The Christianity tells us, no, the world is messed up. Tragedy happens. People do bad stuff. But we don't have to lie about this stuff, because we have a place to go with it. The world is messed up, but Christianity teaches us and tells us and shows us that there is a king, and his name is Jesus, and he is in control. If we could see behind what we can see, we would see that there are, in fact, monsters, that there are dragons, that there are demons behind all of the chaos and the brokenness of the world, but they tremble, all of them tremble at the presence of Jesus. So your kids ask you, Dad, Mom, are there dragons? And you can say, yes. But there is a good king, and his name is Jesus, and Jesus is a dragon slayer. We don't need to lie to our kids about the world. What our kids need is something to hold on to. The world is messed up, yes, but run to Jesus. He is our refuge. You can trust him. That's what David is doing here. But here's the thing. Most people, we're just honest, many of you in this room, you're not running to God as your refuge. You're not like, this is not where you go when things get hard. This is not where you go when you feel the brokenness. You're looking to other things. When you feel the brokenness, you feel the chaos, you feel insecure, your response isn't to turn to God for security. But you turn to money, you turn to success, you turn to sex, you turn to family to bring you comfort, to bring you peace, to bring you joy, to bring you security. And some of you, no doubt, are sitting there going, well, I would never do that. I mean, yeah, maybe some of these people in this room, and I know some people out there, they might do that, but I would never do that. But I want you to just consider something. Think about what you pray for. Think about what drives your desperation. Think about what consumes your thoughts. And be careful that you're not trying to use God to prop up your refuge instead of running to God as your refuge. You need to ask, we all need to ask the question, is there something behind the veil? Is there something behind what I can see? Is there something, everywhere we go, we are told, no, there's not anything. There's not a veil, there's nothing. There's just what you can see, and that's it. That's all there is. If we can't see it, if we can't explain it, it's not real, and you're a fool for believing in something that you can't see. This is what our kids are being taught every single day. But there's something that is happening that even secular sociologists are beginning to discover. That when you remove God from a worldview, when you remove God from someone's perspective of reality, when you remove God from the reality of the worldview of a people, you remove meaning and purpose. So we shouldn't be surprised that we're teaching our kids, that our kids are being taught that there's nothing beyond what you can see. Only what can be explained is what you should put your hope in, your trust in. There's nothing beyond this. So we should not be surprised that we live in a culture where our kids are more depressed and anxious than ever. Where our kids are shooting up schools. Because if there's nothing behind the veil, if this is all there is, man, then what's the point? But if the question is there something behind the veil? Is there a soul? And if so, then if God isn't your refuge, then whatever you think will save you is a joke. This is why pro athletes who become rich and famous for their athletic ability, they retire and they will often lose their mind. Why? Because they don't have that security. They don't have the thing. They don't have the ability that made them, that brought their security. They've lost it, and it crushes them. Steve Jobs was worth $10 billion, and his money could not save him from cancer. Bill Gates, he's worth more than $124 billion, and it could not save his marriage. We work so hard to be self-sufficient. Like we're just a people, we got this. I got this. I can do this. We can make this happen. And yet Jesus is the one that taught us to pray, would you give us this day our daily bread? What's he doing? Jesus is bringing into the everyday stuff of life the reality that we are dependent on God for this. God, we need you for today, for bread today. God, you are our refuge. So he says, preserve me, God, for in you I take refuge. And then he says, I say to the Lord, you are my Lord. Now, David is crying out for help, and he has declared that, God, you are my refuge, and you are my Lord. You are the sovereign Lord. You are the Lord. You are the one who sees it all, who knows it all. You are the king. You are the master. And you're not just the master, the king, the creator out there somewhere. You are my Lord. You are my king. You are my master. This is personal. You are the one who rules and reigns my life, is what he's saying. You're not just kind of holding up the universe in some general sense. There's like human, like mankind that you're kind of watching out for. No, this is my life. You rule and reign over my life. This is personal. He says that I say to the Lord, you are my Lord. I have no good apart from you. Now, this sounds a bit extreme, doesn't it? I have no good apart from you. I mean, it sounds like, it's like, David, you are king, man. Certainly you've got some good stuff going on. What do you mean the only thing that you have good in your life is God? And it seems so silly, especially when we come to the Psalms. It seems kind of like this is kind of like poetic, like kind of overspeak. That he's just being poetic here. I have no God, I have no good but you. This is what you're supposed to say. This sounds nice. And so oftentimes when we read it, especially in the Psalms, we just kind of pass right by it. Like he's just being poetic. That's nice. I have nothing good besides you. It's like a couple of weeks ago, my wife brought home takeout from one of her favorite restaurants, P.F. Chang's. And I've never been. She's tried to get me to go for years. But as far as I could tell, there's no cheeseburger on the menu. So just not interested. And she says, yeah, but the lettuce wraps, they're just amazing. I'm like, are you serious? Like, you think you're going to convince me with lettuce wraps? Ain't happening, right? Ain't happening. So anyway, she brought home P.F. Chang's the other night, and okay, it wasn't bad, all right? I didn't have lettuce wraps. I tried a bite of hers, and it ain't doing it, right? But I had something else. It was pretty good. It was pretty good. But what was amazing, what was just amazing, was this thing that they called it. So we had like this, she had our like meals out and that whole deal. And so I go back into the kitchen. There's this box sitting there that's not been opened. I'm like, what is this? And she's like, well, I got it for after dinner. I'm like, and I looked this thing up like immediately. I'm like, I don't even want to get into it till I know, because this is crazy. This is like a piece of art here. So I look it up, and it's called the Great Wall of Chocolate, people. This is crazy. The Great Wall of Chocolate. The Great Wall of, it's this massive piece of chocolate cake, and it was so good. So good. And while I was eating this cake, there may have been a moment where I have whispered to the cake, I have nothing good besides you. It was that good. But listen, that's just momentary bliss. All right, that's all that is. All right, that's just momentary. That's all that was in that moment, just momentary bliss. Listen, that's not what's happening here in Psalm 16. That's not what David is doing. This is not momentary bliss. This is not poetic overspeak. This is not exaggeration. This is David giving the most honest and true perspective of his experience of knowing God. He's going, after I've experienced what I've experienced with God, after knowing what I know of this God, this is what I've come to find. I have nothing good but him. There's nothing good in my life. When I have God, I have everything. That he is the supreme treasure. One writer said it this way: everything without God is pathetically inferior to God without everything. Or as C.S. Lewis put it, he who has God and everything else has no more than he who has God only. For David, this moved past just belief in God, but it found its way into his desires, into his affections. This is what Christianity is. It gets to our desires. If all Christianity is for you is belief and behavior, then you've missed it. You will never understand what David is exalting in here. When Christianity, all Christianity is for you is belief and behavior, there's no joy. It's just formula. This is just the way I live. I say I believe these things, so now I got to live like this. It's just what I got to do. I subscribe to this, and so I get this, and maybe there'll be heaven when I die, but this is just it. Listen, there's no joy in that. There's no joy in it. In fact, that's not even Christianity. Christianity isn't about changing your behavior. It's about changing your desires. Where all of a sudden, God is the one that you love, that he is your supreme treasure. When compared to God, there is nothing that comes close in your affections and your desires. It's like I have no good in my life apart from you, God. Jesus referred to this. If you remember, if you were with us when we went through the book of Mark, there was a time when Jesus is in a room and someone is trying to get to Jesus and say, hey, your family is here. And Jesus makes this comment and says, well, if you don't hate your family, you can't be one of mine. And we read that and we're like, Jesus, whoa, hello. But here's the thing. We read that in context of everywhere else in the scripture. It says, hey, respect your husband, love your wife, do all of these things, like take care of your kids. If you don't take care of your family, you're worse than an unbeliever. I mean, so the Bible is certainly not saying, like, literally hate your family. But what he's saying is you should love the Lord so much that there's no comparison. Like, not anything comes in close second. You realize that I have no good in my life apart from God. There's something about sickness and grief that have a way of bringing clarity to this. You know, when you're driving away from the hospital where you just discover someone that you love has cancer, you could care less about what kind of car you're driving. You realize if I don't have God, I have nothing. David says, I have no good apart from you. And then he says, as for the saints in the land, they are the excellent ones, in whom is all my delight. David's going, look, I'm not the only one who sees this. I'm not the only one who knows God is my refuge and is my Lord and is my treasure. There are others who see this. There are others who trust in God like this. And David is saying there is something about the way that they trust in God. There's something about the way in which they treasure God that it gives me great delight. You know, it's what's part of what makes this gathering so beautiful. That we hear from each other the stories of how we're trusting in Jesus and how he is bringing joy in trials and how he was so kind and he is so merciful to strengthen us to live this way, to live this life the way that life was meant to be lived for our good and for his glory. And if you've been here to hear the stories of those that share before they're baptized, about how God had, like, that this is where my life was, and this is where God interjected and came and saved me. And this is what God is doing in my life right now. It's not perfect, but he's working in and through it all. I mean, there's something about these stories. When I hear these baptism stories, that something in me just wells up with just affection for what God is doing. And it's not that the God, that I'm delighted so much, I'm taking great delight in the person that is sharing, but it causes me, their story, it's like, look what God has done. And it causes us to take great delight in God for what he is doing among us, his people, the saints, the excellent ones. And then he says, the sorrows of those who run after another God shall multiply. Their drink offerings of blood I will not pour out, or take their names on my lips. In other words, David's going, man, after I've come to know about God the way that I've come to know and experience God, as my refuge, as my Lord, as my treasure, why in the world would I go anywhere else? After I've experienced what I've experienced with this God, why would I go anywhere else? And he says, besides, do you know where anywhere else leads? Do you know where that leads? Do you know what comes with running to other things, running to relationships, running to your marriage, running to your kids, running to money, sex, retirement, whatever it is, running to these things for security and comfort? You know what comes? He says, sorrows upon sorrows upon sorrows upon sorrows. They just keep multiplying. That Jesus alone gives you purpose, meaning, identity. You try to find your identity, you try to find your purpose in other things, they will fail you every time. You say, well, oh man, come on now. Following Jesus, this stuff is hard. And Christianity is hard. So what do? We trade out long-term gain for short-term gain. Man, just give me what feels good in the moment. Give me what feels good in this life. I'm not sure that the short-term gain, short-term pain is worth the long-term gain. Do you know what? That chocolate cake that my wife brought home, like I said, man, it was good. It was so good. But do you know what happened, like, no joke, 15 minutes after I devoured that thing? I was sick. I was sick. My wife and I were watching a movie, and for 30 minutes, I was just in a coma. I was just out of it. I had no idea what was going on. I was just in pain in my entire body, which, looking back, actually was a good thing. It's a good thing because it's a reminder that I don't need to make that a normal thing in my life. Because you know what happens if I make the Great Wall of Chocolate a normal thing in my life? I get a dad bod. That's what happens. And listen, no offense to anybody, I just don't want it, all right? I don't want a dad bod, all right? But that's what's coming long term if I don't have some short-term discipline, living for the long game. Listen, that's what the Christian life is. This is what it is. It's living the long game. So I can't see what's behind the veil, but I'm just going to be honest with you. Sometimes what I do see looks pretty good. What I can see, it looks like it would give me some happiness. Looks like it would give me some pleasure right now. I mean, sex before marriage, sex outside of marriage, unethical business practice, debt, making more to spend more. And David says, let me tell you where that leads. That leads to sorrow after sorrow after sorrow after sorrow. And we're in it for the long game. Long-term gains are coming, and he's going to get to that in just a moment. And he says, the Lord, though, is my chosen portion and my cup. When I read that this week, I couldn't help but think about my youngest, and she's I mean, if there is on the kids menu, if there is mac and cheese, that's what she's getting. All right? It doesn't matter what else is on the menu. If it's mac and cheese, it doesn't matter how many things are on the menu. There could be whatever on the menu. As soon as she hears mac and cheese, yep, that's what I want right there. It doesn't matter. Everything else cancels out. It's mac and cheese every time. I thought about that because this is what David is saying. He's like, given the choice of the Lord and anything else, it's the Lord every time. You don't even have to read the rest of it. I don't even need to know. It's the Lord every single time. And then he says, you hold my lot. You hold my lot. In other words, God is the one who is sovereign. He is the one that is behind the veil. He is the one that is working it all out. He is the one that is making things happen. I'm not in control here. He is the one that is sorting it all out. He is the one that is doing it all. And he's not only doing it in the world, but he's doing it in my life. That he is sorting it all out in my life. That he sees all the things, that he's working it all out in my life. He is the one who is sovereign, in control of all of it. And so then, how is God using his sovereign power? How is God taking all of this authority, this power that he has? How is he using all of that power? Here's what he says. He says, the lines have fallen for me in pleasant places. Indeed, I have a beautiful inheritance. The lines have fallen, referring to borders of some property where you live. And then pleasant places, he might as well just use the word because it's the same word that he uses down in verse 11. He might as well just use the word pleasures. The lines have fallen for me in pleasant places, in pleasures. The borders surrounding David have the presence. What David is saying, the borders surrounding me are not just me, but it includes the Lord. The presence, I have the presence of the Lord, his refuge, his Lord, his treasure. David is saying that God is the sovereign Lord who has supreme power. And get this, and he uses that power. He could use it to do anything that he wants. But he uses that power to give to him the pleasures of being with God and knowing God in this life. And not just this life, but he said, I've got more coming. I've got more coming forever. And then he says, I bless the Lord who gives me counsel. In the night also my heart instructs me. David's going, God is not only my refuge and my Lord and my treasure, but he is my counselor. He's not only my refuge in that he does stuff that I don't know what he's doing, but he's just doing stuff to protect me. But he counsels me by his word and how to live the way life was created to be lived. Because when I live that life, when I live according to his word, my life, I'm protected from sorrow after sorrow after sorrow. See, this is what his word is for us. If you're ignoring God's word, you're ignoring a refuge. Like in God's word, we have the counsel to know the way of life. It gives us the way, like this is the way leading to sorrow and death, and this is the way leading to life. This is what God's word is for us. And he says, I have set the Lord always before me, because he is at my right hand, and I shall not be shaken. Now, I don't know, but I read that and I'm like, wait. That sounds a lot different than, preserve me, O God. It's like something shifted here between preserve me, O God, and I will never be shaken. I shall not be shaken. He is at my right hand. I shall not be shaken. What happened here? There was this desperation, and now all of a sudden it turns into confidence. How did that happen? Well, David, all of a sudden, he has been remembering the truth of who God is. That he is my refuge, that he is the one that I run to. That he is my sovereign Lord. He's the one who he holds my lot. No matter what hits me, even death, he's working it all out for my good. He is my supreme treasure. He's the only one I need. He is the one who has promised an inheritance for waiting for me. David remembers who he is. And he's going, wait a second. I have what I need. He is everything that I need. He says, therefore my heart is glad and my whole being rejoices. My flesh also dwells secure. And now he's going to tell us why he was asking for this protection to begin with. We're going to get to what David was after, what he wanted protection from when he said, preserve me, O God. And here's what he says. He says, for you will not abandon my soul to Sheol, or let your Holy One see corruption. So this is the preservation that he asked for. When he said, preserve me, O God, what he was after was, don't let me be lost in death. Keep me body and soul forever. David is sure that for everything that God has been for him in this life, his refuge, his treasure, his Lord, his counselor, that he will be that for him forever. That death will not be the end of this relationship. Death will not cancel out all that he has known and loved about his God. David is saying, if he knows how to take care of me in this life, well, then I know he knows how to take care of me in the life to come. And so what does that life to come look like? And he closes it up by saying this, you make known to me the path of life. In your presence there is fullness of joy. At your right hand are pleasures forevermore. You know, Christianity hasn't done a very good job at pointing to what's coming for those who trust in Jesus. I go to many funerals and we say a lot of things to make people feel better, to comfort people, and it's good. It's a good thing. We should want to do this. We want to comfort those that are suffering and those that are hurting. But oftentimes, things are said in those moments, if I'm just being honest with you, a lot of times things are said in those moments that are just not true. Good intentions, but not true. Someone may say, well, that person has passed and now they've got their wings. They've got their wings and they're kind of, they're around and they're an angel with wings. Someone else may say, no, they're looking down on you now. They're with you, looking down on you, and yet someone else will say, well, they're in a better place. And someone else will say, no, they're reincarnated and they're in that tree in their front yard. And they'll always be there for you. It's no wonder we're so confused. It's no wonder why so many people just write this off as fairy tales. Because we have this and we're okay with it. We just live with it. You just, whatever it is, whatever, you just say what you need to say. And you say, your truth is your truth. And it's whatever you want to believe. It's crazy. I mean, and so then we throw in the midst of all that, there's an eternity and God has come. We throw the gospel in and it's like, that's nice. And we just throw that in with, you're going to live in your tree in the front yard. It's I don't know about you, but that's not helpful. And it's not comforting. So this is what I get for eternity? Like this is what's coming? Wait a second. So this is what's coming for me. I mean, I get we're mourning the loss of the one that we love, but you're saying like this is what's coming for me. Like I'm going to be like floating around in some invisible presence, like looking at my family. Like that's it? That's what's coming. That's what I got. Or I'm for eternity stuck in that tree. That's what I got? That's what's coming for me, or millions of years in a robe, playing a harp, singing worship songs. That's what this is. That's what billions of years looks like for me. Maybe I need to check out the Mormons or something, because I think they got something better. Because this doesn't sound like something I want. Listen, that doesn't sound like fullness of joy. That doesn't sound like pleasures forevermore. But here's the reality. The Bible, God's Word, God, the one who is the designer and creator and sustainer of life, has spoken to this. We don't need to make things up. He has spoken to this. That for the believer, the one who has repented of their sin, the one who has God as their refuge, their Lord, their master, their supreme treasure and counselor, Paul says in Philippians chapter 1, to be away from the body is to be present with the Lord. No time lag, no soul sleep, no waiting room. If you belong to Jesus, when you are away from this body, you are with the Lord. And listen, this is not Stephen trying to make us feel better. This is the Bible. And one day, Jesus will raise the bodies of all of those who belong to him. One day he will raise the bodies of all of those who belong to him to live on this earth, whether it will be a new heaven, a new earth. and we will live on this earth physically with him as our king. That's what's coming. Not floating around. Not in the tree. Not wings, angels' wings, and whatever that is. This is real life. This is what's coming. A new earth, a new heaven. Touch and feel like we can shake hands and we can hug and this is what is happening. This is what is coming. And there will be pleasures forevermore. That's what's coming. Take the greatest pleasure you can think of. Many people might put sex in that category. Whatever that is for you, whatever it is for you, think of the greatest pleasure that you can imagine. Whatever that is only a shadow, is only a pointer to a greater pleasure and joy that God has waiting for those who belong to him. Now, there's a part of this that may not seem to connect, and maybe I don't know, maybe you've landed there, maybe you haven't. But David who wrote this, lived 1,000 years before Jesus. And David died. David died. And so he's like, don't let this happen to me, right? But don't let your Holy One see corruption. Don't let me turn to dust. Don't let that happen. So what's going on here? Well, before this, David had been given a promise by God, and and I want to read for you this promise that was given from God to David through the prophet Nathan. In 2 Samuel 7, Nathan prophesies, speaks on behalf of God to David, and here's what he says. So, David, when your days are fulfilled and you lie down with your fathers, I will raise up your offspring after you, who shall come from your body, and I will establish his kingdom. He shall build a house for my name, and I will establish the throne of his kingdom forever. 1,000 years later, Jesus would come out of the line of David, out of the family line of David. He came to earth. He lived a perfect life, no sin, died a criminal's death on a cross, and then rose from the dead. Just days after Jesus rose from the dead, Peter gets up in the streets of Jerusalem. I don't know if he gets up on a bucket, if he's on a balcony, or whatever it is. There's thousands of people there. Like something happened. Everybody knows something happened. Jesus has been raised from the dead. These people are trying to figure it out. And Peter gets out in front of these people on the streets of Jerusalem, and here's what he says. And he says this about David. And all of them, they might have had different thoughts about Jesus. They all understood and respected David. And here's what he said about David. Being therefore a prophet, and knowing that God had sworn with an oath to him that he would set one of his descendants on his throne, he foresaw and spoke about the resurrection of the Christ, that he was not abandoned to Hades, nor did his flesh see corruption. This Jesus God raised up, and of that we are all witnesses. Listen, David didn't know exactly how, but he knew that what he was talking about in verse 10 was pointing to something greater. He knew that someone from his own family line would put an end to death forever. And that promise to David was fulfilled in Jesus. That Jesus was crucified, he was dead, he was buried, but before death could turn him to dust, Jesus defeated death. And for those before Jesus who trusted in this promise that had been given to David, that there would be one who would come. And for those who today trust in Jesus' death and resurrection, death for us is put to death. That ultimately, Psalm 16 is about Jesus. It's about his death and resurrection. And through trusting in Jesus as your refuge, he is the one who you run to for your salvation. And trusting him as your king, that he is the one who reigns and rules your life. And trusting him as your supreme treasure, that he is all you need. Because of his life, his death, his resurrection, there will come a day for you that he will raise you to life here on the new earth, the new heavens, where there will be pleasures forevermore. But for those who have not repented, those who have not turned to Jesus as a refuge, as their treasure, as their supreme King and Lord, to be away from the body is to be away from Jesus, forever separated from God in eternal torment. The question that you need to ask is, am I willing to put my life in his hands and trust him with it? So let's pray together.